Привit. I'm Chuck Olinik. I'm a Ukrainian-American who was baptized with the name Yaroslav, and I also use that name in the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I have been working for a long time on developing a Rus persona. And also, I've been covering folklore. Well, this is a weird intersection of me working on my heritage, folklore stuff, and the Rus persona, because I'm enough of a history geek. That's why I'm wearing this instead of being in garb for this particular video. I would be reading folklore and I'd run into these very jarring references of, let's see, a character in a story might be a few inches tall or several yards tall. And, there would be measurements in miles or in kilometers. And that got me really wondering, what did the people do as far as, creating measurements? And yes, the Rus did just like everybody else. They used their body parts to figure out, certain measurements. And then there's, the thing of, okay, how do we make this consistent? So there's, the fingers are being used and palms and hands and, the distance between the elbow and the fingertips and, how the arms spread apart. And, okay, I stumbled across a list and that sort of worked. And then I noticed there were some other references, and I call them Peterisms, because these were clearly introduced later when Peter the Great came to power. About 1725, he just said, nah, we're going to be more like Western Europeans. We're going to use inches and feet, stuff like that. So I saw translations and I'm trying to sort out which one's which. And then I decided the way I need to do this is I need to actually build something tangible. And then I found out about story sticks. Actually, I found the expression was used after I started building them. And I'm going to show you a few that I made out in the garage in order to wrap my brain around, how this stuff works. So once I figured out measurements, I needed to make that trip to Home Depot. And I also went to Staples and I picked up a yardstick and a ruler as basic throwaways that I was going to attach to the story sticks. Turned out I didn't really want to do that because my experienced friends who are woodworkers or who also do sewing told me never use different rulers on the same project. I'm like, I get it, because I saw the differences. All right, so start with the basic measurement, which is an artisan, which I'm going to come back to, but essentially this is the Rus yardstick. All right, and we go to the smallest measurement, and that's called a vershok. All right, that's 1 3/4 inches. It comes from the word verch, which is like top or foremost. All right, so pretty much everything's really done with this. Okay, the illustration showed that the vershok is basically this long. Let's compare it with an actual measurement. Okay. Hey, and that's the short finger. That's the one that went through the table saw. Let's try the other one. Okay, still longer than a vershok. Since the height of animals, actually people, are measured in vershoks, I decided, all right, let's go with putting vershoks on everything. Okay, that made sense. There's a trick, though, to measuring people. You have to, if you talk about somebody being, say, 12 vershoks tall, that doesn't mean that they are this tall. All right. You're automatically assuming there's 2 artisan involved, so you kind of get it. I, however, decided on this sashen here, which is like a Rus fathom. I would just simply start with one, and I would go all the way up until I ran out of numbers, just to basically give this a little bit of visual appeal. The vershok is so small that there's a lot of slang associated with it, like, oh, someone's being a vershok away from sin, meaning you're real close to committing sin, or something is 2 vershok above the pot. So that's a very young child, you can see reaching up to the stove. Or someone is a bag of words, but a vershok of deeds, meaning they talk a lot, but they don't do very much. Okay. Next measurement, it's a piad. And the name comes from palm, but actually the way I tend to remember it is, okay, palm of the hand, but pyat. Pyat is 5. Okay? But that's not the number of vershoks that's involved in a piad. All right, the piad is supposed to be the distance between your thumb and the tip of the index finger. Let's see how my stumpy little dwarf fingers measure up. Okay, end of the thumb, end of the index finger, and just barely there. Okay, so that works. Then there's the proverbs or sayings about piads. For instance, if someone is 7 piads across the forehead, they're brilliant. If, however, someone is described as less than 7 piads across the forehead, you're going to need to have things explained to you and using very small words. Then there's also the expression, you do not give up even a piad of land. Okay, let's add to the confusion. There's more than one kind of piad. And it depended on where you were in the Rus lands or later in Russia or Ukraine. There were references to a little piad and a big piad. And the big piad measured out at something like a bit over 12 inches. So, maybe that was like a double. And later when Peter the Great comes along and he, decides that he's going to add inches and feet, to the measuring system in Russia, the piad ends up going through a name change. It's going to be called a chetvert, or a quarter. And the way I'm remembering it, четыре is 4 in Ukrainian. So I'm seeing the connection between the words. Now, what was the piad useful for? Well, measuring the size of icons. Okay. Measuring the depth of snow. I suppose if you really want to depress yourself. So, there we go. That's the piad. Now we move on to the lokot. And the lokot is basically, it's the Rus cubit. All right? So it's supposed to be from elbow to finger, or to fingertip, and it's supposed to be 17 inches. Okay, then I found a few expressions about the lokot or the lokotok. That's the diminutive form. First, like someone being a lokotok in height, but his coat's still too short, or he's only as tall as Tom Thumb, but his beard is a lokotok long. And so it's kind of like a thing of like pointing out the discrepancy between someone's appearance and someone's social standing. Okay, the next one, this is the arshin. Sometimes it's called a shag, and it basically is 28 inches long. The original measurement was supposed to be shoulder to fingertip, and I'm just a bit short on that. Okay, so this is the standard. I broke it up into 4 piads and total of 16 vershos. All right. Every merchant tended to have his own version of what an arshin was, but that's why we're having, sticks created. All right. And measurements becoming more standardized. There's an interesting note that I found out recently that rifles made in Russia before World War I were ranged in arshin. And you have expressions for the arshin. So if you're going to gauge everybody by one's own arshin, it's like you're gauging everybody by your own yardstick. And if someone is standing really straight and tall, it's a swallowed an arshin. The next unit of measurement is the sashin. And that's basically the Rus fathom. And the way this should work, it's like 3 different versions of the sashin. One of them is the arm span, fingertip to fingertip. All right. One of them is the slanted sashin, which means you're basically putting one end at the end of your big toe on one foot, and your fingertip should be touching the other end. I'm almost there, so at least I don't feel that inadequate. And then there's the third one, which is basically 3 arshin long, and that's what I made mine. And the last unit we're going to get into, that's a versta. That's measuring distance. It was, I think the word is based upon turnaround, because it's the idea of an ox pulling a plow. How long can it continuously pull a plow before it has to either stop or just turn around? And so and that works out to be roughly a kilometer, or it actually should be 500 sashin, but roughly a kilometer. And this is where you would see, on some of the roads that were maintained, you would see vers posts or stoppé, and it tells you how far you've gone. All right. And then for some of the roads, it would be done like every 2 versta. Okay, so once I got the measurements done on these 3 story sticks, I had a problem. I had to put marks on them because I had to figure out what was what. And at first I thought, I'm just going to put Hindu Arabic numbers on. The Rus didn't use that stuff. They used Cyrillic letters, and the only way you could tell that a letter was not a letter, that it was a number, because it had this little mark above it called a titlo, which to me always looked like a crooked bow tie. So, okay, I started researching how to do the numbers. All right, so there's the titlo, as best as I could do it with a wood burner. And the numbers are easy enough, 1 through 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, and if you're curious about these little marks up here, they aren't mistakes. Those are from a measurement called a ladon, or a palm, which is supposed to be every 3 inches. And I just simply put these on so that we could kind of tell what's going on compared to Western European measurements. So what do you do when you get past 10? You put a character in front of the 10. So instead of 11, this is 11. 12 is 12. 13, 13. But now the rest of these up to 19, those are the nadsets. Okay, those are the teens. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and now we get to 20 with the K. 20. Okay, what do you do when you go past 20? Well, when we were talking about it in English, you get 10, and then it's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. What do you do when you go past 20? Well, in English, 21, 22, 23. So here we have 20, 21. Notice now the 20's over here. 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Okay, now we need a new character. 30. And now, just continue. Same pattern. 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. Oh, now we're coming up on another one, coming up to 40. 40. 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48. Why'd I do it that way? Look, it was a bit more visually interesting to me, but there was also another reason. It was forcing me to look at the Cyrillic alphabet and also at the number system and remember more of what my parents taught me that I'd forgotten years ago. So, are these ever going to get shown to anybody? Not unless it's the video. You know, I didn't make this for some sort of arts project for a competition. I just did this just so I could wrap my brain around how the Rus measured things. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you stick with me.